Good morning. I'm Vanessa Hill. I'm a nurse at East Point, and today's topic is stress management. And you think, wow, who has stress now, right? That since March we've been dealing with a pandemic, and we're in the middle of hurricane season. So, do we have anything to stress about? Maybe. So, what we're going to talk about is what is stress, what causes stress, the effects of stress, and is there anything I can do about it when I do feel it? So, this may surprise you. I'm saying that in a funny kind of way, but more than half of working people experience stress in their jobs. That probably doesn't come as a surprise to any of us. But job stress accounts for billions of dollars of lost productivity, wages, and medical bills because we have all those physical symptoms and we think something's really wrong and we go to the doctor, and it can be just stress. And we think about when we say just stress, that can be a big deal because that affects every inch of our being. So, stress is the way we react physically, mentally, and emotionally to the various conditions, changes, and demands of life. Stress is that pressure from the outside causing tension on the inside. We can have acute stress or chronic stress. When we think about acute stress, that's usually like a one time incident. Think about if you have a car accident. As stressful as that can be, hopefully it doesn't happen over and over again. So, it happens, you get over it. But think about the chronic stress. Chronic stress can be, whether you have an illness that you're dealing with, you're taking care of somebody that has an illness, um, or it could be just one thing happening, another after another. When we got sent home for a pandemic, how many of us thought months later we would still have to be dealing with it? And now, those of us that are from the Carolinas, we're right in the middle of hurricane season, and it was like, really, what else? I told somebody the other day, I don't want to know what else because we can only deal with so much. There are different levels of stress that we deal with. There are low levels of stress that we don't even recognize. But think about, there are some stressful events in our life that helps us. It challenges us to be creative and resourceful. There's a certain amount of stress that's necessary that keeps us active and alive. That's the things that give our life a little spice, right? We have a lot to do and we get up to the challenge and we get it all done and we feel really good about ourselves. But then think about the high levels of stress that can really cause harm to us. And we usually call that kind of stress distress. But there are examples of good stress and bad stress. We've talked about some of the bad stress, but what's something that causes you good stress? What about having a baby? Is that a good thing? Do you think a baby is not stressful? Think about planning a wedding. That's a happy, joyous time. But if you think planning a wedding is not stressful, graduation, whatever that those events are, they can be happy times, but there's a lot to do. It's important to keep in mind that when we talk about stress, it's not the events, it's our reaction to the events. So think about what causes stress. Is it something that you just had an argument with your significant other? You're in a traffic jam, you're at the light, you need to be somewhere soon, and somebody's turning left and there's not a turn light. Can that be aggravating? Yes. Could be that we have a bad experience at our favorite restaurant or our favorite store. They didn't take care of us like we thought that they ought to. But then we get to a little more stress where it could be that we're not in good health or somebody that we love is not in good health. We may lack the support system that we think about. When I grew up, all my family lived right around each other. Well, now my family lives in Kentucky and we're here in North Carolina. Is that stressful? Sometimes it can be. So we're a more mobile community. In the conflicts with our belief system. What if I want to go to church on Sunday or Wednesday night, but I have something else to do? Our kids are in sports or whatever that event is. Sometimes we feel bad about that. We feel conflicted about that we don't get to do everything. But the stress that we feel can be physical or it can be mental. Think about some of the physical symptoms that you feel when you're under stress. Is it a rapid heartbeat? Is it that unrelenting headache that you feel? You just feel your head throbbing. That stiff neck or tight shoulders. Could be that you have an upset stomach. And then you think about the mental symptoms. It can be just the most, it's no big deal at all, but it irritates you. And everybody you see today irritates you. I find when everybody's irritating me, it's probably me rather than everybody else. But just nothing suits us. We lose our temper more often. We're exhausted all the time. And we start doubting that our ability, that we can do anything. We just don't think we can do anything anymore. And we feel like we're missing opportunities. So think about this when your job, what kind of stress do you have? Could be control issues. Is there anything that you can control about your job? Or is it that everybody's making decisions for you and you don't get any say so? It could be competence. Can I perform well? Do I do a good job? And then right there with it is clarity. Did we get adequate training? Did somebody tell us what we're supposed to do? Have our duties changed? Think about what we're dealing with this virus. Has our duties changed? How many of you are not going to work anymore? You're sitting at your kitchen table or your bedroom and you're working. Has your situation changed? It absolutely has. Think about communication. Sometimes tension can happen in the workplace just because of communication. Could be now that we're not all sitting in the room together to figure out what we're all supposed to do. In support, do our co-workers have our backs on situations? I got to tell you, where I work, I have the best co-workers in the whole wide world. We support each other. We tell each other what a good job we've done. What can I do to help you? And that's what we need, is to be supportive of each other. The other thing is significance. Do we find our job meaningful? Can we take pride in what we do? So some jobs involve environmental stress. There's potentially unsafe situations, and it's just because of the job we do. Think about our first responders. Think about the policemen, the EMS workers. We're expecting a hurricane. If our power goes out, we want it back on now, right? But think about somebody's loved one that's up in that bucket truck, that the wind's blowing, it's raining, and they're going to be around electricity. Do we think that's a good idea? If they get our power on, yeah, right? But that's an unsafe situation, and we have to keep that in mind. So we talked about acute and chronic stress. Stress can affect us both immediately and over time. When we talk about acute stress, it can happen quickly. Our body responds and we can get over it. Think about, for me, if I see a mouse or a snake, I have acute stress. I'm going to have that fight or flight. I'm going to run. I'm going to get on the table. But at some point, when I don't see it anymore, my body releases the all clear signal that it's safe to get off the table. It's safe that I can go back outside or walk the path, whatever it is. But what happens when our brain doesn't send that all clear signal? We're in that stressful situation all the time, and there's no release of stress. There's too many stressful situations blending together. It's one right after the other. We can't get over one before we're dealing with something else. And then think about the effects of chronic stress. How many of us have high blood pressure because of the chronic stress? What about depression or heart disease, asthma? Um, Sometimes it affects our immune system. We can get sick from having too much stress. We get that muscle pain. We have stomach trouble. And it even affects our diabetes. We can do everything we're supposed to with our diabetes, and our numbers can be higher than they should be just because the stress we're under. The way we deal with stress could be the way we learn to deal with stress. How did our families deal with it? It's our genetic makeup, our experience with stress. Did we learn to deal with stress in a certain way? Our coping strategies. Do we have that support system? And there's some people that just seem to be better at it than others. They just weather one storm after the other, and it doesn't seem to bother them. Excuse me. And then you have the people that the littlest minor thing happens and they just fall apart. They can't deal with it. What we have to be careful of is when we get in a stressful situation, how do we cope with that? If you know a smoker, think about when they get frustrated, what happens? They need to go out and smoke, right? Can be the same way with alcohol or prescription drug abuse. Doesn't have to be prescription. We can abuse over-the-counter medications. Think about if you have a headache every day and you take just pill after pill of ibuprofen or Tylenol. What do you think that's going to do to your stomach? That's something that we'll have to deal with because of stress. Could be that we're eating poorly, and it could be that we're just not exercising the way we should. So the body experiences stress from two sources: the stress itself and the unhealthy way that we deal with it. Think about if you get a frustrating phone call. What happens after you hang up? For me, I want a bag of chips. I'm going to eat a handful of salty something. But think about, my coworker likes chocolate. So if she gets stressed, she eats chocolate. If we take just 2 or 3 chips or a bite of a candy bar, that may not be bad. But think if that happens all day long. Think about if I need a whole bag of chips to get over what I'm dealing with. Is that an unhealthy way to deal with stress? Of course it is. And how do we evaluate the stress we're under? It's unrealistic to think that there is nothing ever going to be stressful in our life. Stress is an unavoidable part of our life. But it's a matter of our perception too. How we view the situation determines how much stress it causes us. And one way to evaluate stress is to ask yourself, what factors am I dealing with that contributes to my stress level? A major cause of stress is the need to adapt to change. Have we had any changes that we've dealt with over the last few months? Think about, have you just got married? Have you just got divorced? Do you have a significant other? Somebody new? Has a child left home? Have you had a baby? And a big one for me is, have you ever moved? Oh my goodness, talk about stress. But in a lot of those that we just talked about are good things, but it's still stressful, and we have to deal with that. So, when we talk about what signs of stress do I have, how often are we dealing with those? How intense are they? And for how long do I experience that? Is it just a fleeting thought, or am I ruminating? I just can't quite get over it. And we have to ask ourselves, how do I cope with stress? Am I yelling at family and friends? Excuse me. Do I jump into activities? I'm frustrated with you, so I'm just going to leave. I'm going to go shopping. I'm just not going to deal with that. And what about drinking or smoking more? Sometimes that's the way we deal with stress. Or do we have a sense of control over our lives? Do I see change as a challenge, that's something good? There's a lot of us that don't like change. We see that as a threat, not a challenge. And Sometimes we have to check that because nobody likes change, and we sure had a lot of change these past few months. Do I have a strong network of support? Do I have those close relationships that I can call somebody when I'm having a hard time? One of the first skills to learn in managing stress is how do we relieve our stress? Because you know that we're gonna have stress, so how we cope with it is gonna help us in every aspect of our life. Our physical activity, keeping a journal if you like to write, talking about our feelings. There's a lot of people that don't want to share their experiences, but sometimes that can be very helpful. Could be that you need to laugh or cry. Sometimes crying can be very therapeutic. Or finding an activity that you enjoy. And again, it's whatever that activity that you like. It could be something as simple as coloring, it could be reading a book, whatever that activity is for you that you enjoy. Think about if somebody wants, is Sudoku good for you? Absolutely, that would be a good activity. I don't like math, so that's not going to be therapeutic for me. That's just going to add stress and be frustrating. So you got to be sure that that's something that you like to do. So, how do we take care of ourselves? How do we relax when we're having stress? Could be just the way we're mindful of the way we're breathing. Could be that we need a massage if we can, if you can afford that and you have somebody to do that. Could be the aromatherapy. Is there a good smelling candle? Is it the essential oils? Is it taking a bubble bath, and just relaxing in amongst all those bubbles? Could be exercise, whether it's yoga, tai chi, could be meditation, whatever that looks like for you. We talked about that stress is unavoidable, but it's important to find ways to decrease our stress and to prevent it if we can. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies because we're not managing our time properly. Um, we need to figure out what our healthy our strategies are. Could be that we need a lifestyle change. And we need social support. What does that look like for us? Are we willing to let somebody help us? Sometimes stress is overwhelming. There's nothing that we can do to plan for that we can deal with the stress that we're under. And if this is the case, you may want to get outside help from a counselor or a psychiatrist. East Point's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The telephone number is 800-913-6109. And I hope you have a great stress-free day. Thank you.